All right, in staying true to our training phase series, we did the sprint phase, we did the Olympic phase, and now we've concluded the 70.3 phase. And so we'll give an update on what the training looked like and what racing happened. So this block was 6 weeks in duration. And in terms of the total year, it was weeks 14 through to 19. And then in week 20, I did St. George 70.3, which was kind of like the A race for the 70.3 block. I also raced Texas 70.3, which kind of came onto the schedule a little bit late. But that was in week 17. And in terms of the numbers, we'll just do it as we've done the previous video. We'll start with the disciplines and how they come in the triathlon. So we'll start with the swim. I'll just go through each week. So in week 1, which is week 14, I won't say that again. I'll just go week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Week 1 was 23,089 meters of swimming. Week 2 was 22,403 meters of swimming. Week 3, 22,060. Week 4, 20,627. Week 5, which I believe was post-Texas 70.3 week, was 18,402 because I took a couple days off with travel and stuff. And then week 6, which is the final week before the taper into St. George, was 22,357 meters, which is an average across the 6 weeks of 21,489 meters. Not much different to report in the swimming in this block, other than I really started to get a feel for the water and really started to believe and buy into the program that coach has been trying to get me to understand, which is you have to feel the water. You have to stop muscling the water. None of the best swimmers muscle the water. You have to feel the water. And sometimes in order to get the feel for the water, you kind of got to take a few steps back. And so there was a phase there where I definitely took a few steps back, but definitely I started to get some feel for it in this phase. And so one of the probably more interesting and one of my better workouts of the block was 2 rounds of 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150, 175, 200, where you're basically at the limit of your good feel for the water ability. And for me, that was in and around 107 high, 108 low. And I was able to hold that throughout the block off of modest recovery. So that was the swim. The bike, things continued to progress, at least in the intervals. So in week 1, I spent 6 hours, 37 minutes on the bike. Week 2, 8:43. Week 3, 9 hours. Week 4, which was the taper into Texas, 4 hours, 56 minutes. Week 5, 6 hours, 17 minutes. Week 6, 9 hours, 40 minutes. And so that's an average across the 6 weeks of 7 hours, 32 minutes per week of biking. In terms of kind of what the workouts look like, if you recall in the sprint and the Olympic phase, I was doing a lot of high-end stuff, shorter intervals. Well, now in the 70.3 phase, we started to build those intervals out, stop doing a lot of those short, really high-end reps. So, for instance, one of the workouts I did was 3 times 20 minutes at 360 watts with 5 minutes recovery. And then another one, a good one, was 2 rounds of 15 minutes at 390 watts with a total of 2.5 minutes recovery into 20 minutes in the TT position at 360 watts with 3 minutes recovery. And this is kind of where things got interesting for me. Then, I'm doing these workouts and I'm like, I should be able to hold probably around 350 to 360 in a 70.3. And then I went to Texas and I ended up holding 325 watts and it was quite challenging. I won't say it was easy. And if you're someone who in your mind thought that you could hold 350 to 360 and then you go to a 70.3 and hold 325 and it's pretty challenging, then you have to start scratching your head. And so I was training on one bike and racing on another bike. On the training bike, I was using a Stages dual side meter built into a Shimano crank. And in the racing bike, I was using a SRAM AXS meter, which I believe, is it a cork meter? I think it might be a cork meter. But anyways, so then I came home after Texas scratching my head and said, something's just not right. David and I had conversations about this, that my heart rate was getting insanely low off of, pretty big power. For instance, in these 360 watt intervals that I said I was doing on that bike, my heart rate was only like 120. And unfortunately, when things are too good to be true, they're probably too good to be true, because then I put my race bike on to the trainer, which I was neglecting to do because it's disc brake and I didn't want to switch it over. But anyways, I switched it over. And then I got onto my race bike and I was like, oh my gosh, I have been undertraining my bike, or however you want to look at it. I have been not training at the level I thought I was training at for a long time now. And so anyways, once I made that switch, then things got a little more into perspective. So then a very similar workout I did 30 minutes in the uprights on that bike at 360 watts, which was the same heart rate as when I was pushing 390 on the other bike, off 4 minutes recovery, into 45 minutes at 330 watts in the TT position with 5 minutes recovery, which that heart rate corresponded to the 360 watts on the previous meter, the stages meter. And so, which led me to believe that the meters probably read about 30 watts. Well, the one I was racing on was reading 30 watts lower than the one that I was training on, which is a big problem if you're not also kind of using the heart rate, because then you kind of are like leaving stuff on the table, because I was like, ooh, my watts are really good. I'm at 360 and 390, and unfortunately they were not actually at 360 and 390. So better to discover that early in the season than late in the season. So moving on. Long ride, pretty constant in the block, right around 2 hours and 30 minutes. But I remind you, the first couple of weeks, I averaged 252, which really was probably like 222. And then by the end of the block, when I switched over to the other bike, I averaged 230, 2 hours and 30 minutes at 258 on the SRAM meter, which I believe to be true wattage. And my heart rate was about 10 beats per minute higher to do that. So one of the cool things that came out of that block is I definitely started to become more cognizant of the heart rate. And then the final metric I've been kind of presenting is how much time I've spent in the TT position. And in that block on the bike, I averaged across all 6 weeks, 80% of that 7.5 hours average per week in the TT position. Onto the run, in week 1, I ran 72 kilometers, week 2, 76, week 3, 78, week 4, which was the taper into Texas, 55, week 5, 69 kilometers, week 6, 79 kilometers, for a total average across the 6 weeks of 71.5 kilometers per week. Once again, building the volume out from previous phases. The sprint phase, for instance, I did a lot of 400s and 800s and 600s. In this phase, really kind of the shortest intervals I did was a 2K. And so one of the workouts I did with Ari when he was here was 6 by 2K. And I went 6:13, 6:12, 6:11, 6:09, 6:06, 6:02, and took 2 minutes recovery in between each. And then as it progressed through the block, then eventually I did 4 times 3K, coming in 9:30, 9:24, 9:17, 9:13 with 2.5 minutes recovery. And then one of the final workouts Ari and I did together was a tempo run. We really hadn't done any continuous, like long continuous tempo type running, so we decided to do one. And we went 10K in 31:53, and my heart rate was pretty good. I think it was in and around 140 average, so it was within myself. I wasn't racing in practice or anything like that. And then the long run, pretty constant once again, always between 90 and 95 minutes at an average of 430 to 440 per kilometer. And it was always made up largely of trails. But after Texas, or even the week leading into Texas 70.3, I started to have St. George on my mind. And you know that St. George is a very difficult course, a very unique course with a straight uphill for the first 5 kilometers. And so I was starting to build a little bit of pavement running in, and actually I have a hill that's about 1 kilometer long right next to my trails where I run. And so I would build that in, do 3 loops on the trails, and then I would always go like 1K up the hill and 1K down. So just to ready my legs for the ups and downs of St. George. And then I've also been reporting for the running, the time on the trail or the treadmill, and the average across the 6 weeks was 64% of total mileage spent running on soft surfaces. So that was the block. In terms of the results of the block, well, we made videos about them in the previous, well, in the first phase, we did the Oriole Valley Sprint Try, which I thought was a success. And then after the Olympic distance phase, we did the Miami 70.3, which also was a success, I thought. And then this one I thought was really good in that, I mean, St. George, well, Texas was kind of, we didn't taper into it crazy. We kind of had to, we tapered into it, but we didn't recover after. We basically looked at Texas 70.3 as like the beginning of the final phase or the final part of this block going into St. George. So it was a really tight turnaround. Was really difficult. I didn't really recover much. That's one thing I learned, that with age, I'm needing, all my numbers are starting to need to be bigger, in that I used to be able to take like 3 days, basically active recovery after a 70.3, and I could pretty well get back into training full tilt. And now I would say I need at least 5. So I have to start to think about this. Same as the taper. I used to be able to taper basically like 4, max 5 days, and I'd be firing on all cylinders for a race on day 6, and now I probably need at least 6 or even 7 days taper, and I'm assuming as time goes on I'm going to have to continually revamp this type of stuff. So the whole test of the block was St. George 70.3, and fortunately I did train well and I got some good workout in, because St. George, as you know, required everything I had, and so it was satisfying. Of course, it was a great experience. It was fun. I love the 70.3. I'd love to keep racing 70.3, but unfortunately, I got to get that KQ. If you recall, in 2019, I had a really bad Kona, and I just couldn't bring myself to go do one of those late season races like Arizona or Florida, just because I knew it was going to go horribly. And so I just did some 70.3s, and unfortunately, then the pandemic hit, and never got to get that KQ. So next phase in the block is the Ironman phase. And originally we were thinking about doing Tulsa, but I just wanted to do things to the best of my ability, to my knowledge. And so we decided to do Coeur d'Alene instead, because it would allow me to continue on this series properly and not have to do a hybrid block. And so that's what's going to happen next. We're going to, and I've already started, I'm already on day 5 of the Ironman block now. And so that's what we're gonna work on, and then we're gonna report that data to you. And the final test will be in Coeur d'Alene, where we're gonna need to go really hard, because a lot of guys need KQs, and there's not a lot of spots and places to do it. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, leave some comments below if you want us to continue to do this kind of data-driven posts.